Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of ELTAI, I welcome you all for this webinar titled Teaching Advanced English Sentence Structure. So before we move on to the session, I request the participants to watch a prompt clip of ELTAI. So here it is for you. Thank you, participants, for watching the prompt clip of ELTAI. So before I hand over the session to the moderator, a few announcements to the audience. We have a chat facility enabled in the Webinar Jam platform. Audience can post your comments on the session or your ideas. You can share your ideas. When you have questions, you can put your questions on the chat, which will be answered by the speaker at the end of the session. I request the audience not to share your personal information like phone numbers or email IDs on the chat. Then another announcement is certificates for people who are members of ELTAI and who attend the session from the beginning till the end will get your certificates emailed. So with this, we have with us Dr. C. Raghavendra. He's an assistant professor of English, Geetham University. And also he's the president of ELTAI Vizag Chapter. So I hand over the session to Dr. C. Raghavendra to take it forward. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Praveen. Good evening, everyone. As we all know, ELTAI, English Language Teachers Association of India, the largest professional organization in India, has been organizing programs and events for creating skillful teachers and learners of English. In a single sentence, I can say ELTAI has been playing a successful role in nation building by enriching English teachers and learners. I welcome you all to today's webinar on teaching advanced English sentence structure. This is the 82nd webinar, and this will focus on teaching advanced sentence structures to the students of secondary and plus 2 levels. It chiefly concentrates on teaching dependent and independent classes that constitute the advanced structure. I am very glad to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Satish Kumar Nadimpalli. Dr. Satish Kumar did his MA English from Andhra University, Visakhapatnam. He did PGDTE, MPhil, and a PhD in Linguistics and Phonetics from the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. Presently, he is working as Assistant Professor of English in the Training and Placement Cell, Sagi Ramakrishnam Raju Engineering College, Bhimavaram, Andhra Pradesh. His research interests include linguistics and phonetics, English language education, and Telugu and Kannada syntax. He published many research papers in international journals and received 2 Best Paper Awards for his work in the areas of language teaching and linguistics. Dr. Satish Kumar Nadimpalli is shouldering his responsibilities as the convener of ELTAI Godavari Chapter. With this introduction, I would like to invite Dr. Satish Kumar Nadimpalli. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Raghavendra, sir. Am I audible to all people?
Go on.
Thanks, sir, for the webinar. And I profusely thank Professor Mohanraj, sir, and Ilango, sir, for giving me this opportunity to be the resource person of this webinar. And let me first share the PPT with you all. Is this visible?
Yes, sir. It's visible. It's on the screen. Go on, sir.
Yeah. Well, the topic for today's webinar, as you can see on the slide, is teaching advanced English sentence structure. Of course, the title opens up a wide range, a gamut of structural possibilities that we have in English. But for the constraint that we have, the time constraint that we have, I'll confine this to 2 classes which are quintessential for the complex structure. Writing is, in fact, a complex system of communication. It requires a special attention for the reason that it is this text which speaks for the writer. The reader tries to interact with the writer through the writing or through the discourse, written discourse. There needs to be a lot of attention to be paid. Discourse. Sentence structure is the grammatical organization of a sentence. It is a mechanism happening in every language in terms of structure, and it is, as teachers, we are to sensitize the students to the mechanism that's happening in every language in order for them to understand, in order for them to have insights into the structural patterns that are present in the language. Well, I will first talk about the basic sentence structure. I will not give you, since it is intended for secondary school children and also for +2 students. I will not spend time on the basic sentence structure, the rudiments of grammar. But one thing that all of us are supposed to do, ought to do in classroom before we start off dealing with advanced sentence structures is to prepare to the canonical word order, which is SVO in English, which you can start off by asking a particular student in the classroom to just walk across the classroom, so that you can ask some other student to tell the whole class what the earlier student did. Then he would say he walked across the classroom. Then you can derive a structure which is SV. Of course, it is just SV. We don't have an object over there, but still you can keep the structure on the board. I recommend this preparation stage for any class or any component to be taught, for the reason that once the students are prepared to the component they are going to be taught, they will be in a position to receive it to the extent possible, as much as we expect it to be. And once we keep this structure, we can then, of course, keep adding other structural possibilities to the basic word order, which is SVO. And moving on to the advanced structures, I will not deal with the rudimental structures or the basic sentence structures as such, but I'll confine my talk to compound sentences, complex sentences, and of course, which are multi-clausal sentences. I'll try to shed some light on how to teach, how to deal with these compound sentences, complex sentences, and other sentences. Well, in order for the students to know about the advanced structural patterns, it is quintessential for the teacher to let the students know, let the students have some knowledge about what it means to say independent class and what it means to say dependent class. Well, some may negate this, because of the new approaches coming into picture, which have come up of late, which lay emphasis on the communicative approach, situational approach, and other approaches, which aim at to the language, to the functional language. The aspect of teaching or dealing with grammar has taken a back seat, which is, of course, something which we should all feel happy about, because for the fact I experienced it myself in my classroom. If I talk about the grammar and use grammatical terms, my students will immediately lose interest. On hearing the grammatical terms, there are students get scared. So these days, we have almost stopped using the grammatical terms in English classroom, but rather spending the whole session on giving them more and more language input and ensuring that they have exposure towards the language in context, the language in communication, and words like that. But it is a must to have the knowledge of what it means to say independent class and what it means to say dependent class. And these are general terms. They're more of general terms than grammatical terms. Independent and dependent are more of general terms than grammatical terms. So you can freely use these words. And let me tell you at this point of time, at this juncture, grammar is in fact intended to be a means for the students to learn. It's not a different subject. Unfortunately, it's been treated, it's been looked at, not all teachers and students, but by many students and teachers. It's being treated as a separate subject, but it is, in fact, it is intended to help the student to come to the aid of the learning of language. If we can sensitize the students to this fact, to this rationale with which the grammatical analysis came into picture, then the students will definitely get benefited with the grammatical analysis as well. And I personally feel there should always be some amount of grammatical input in every language teaching classroom. You don't have to explicitly say that this is a grammatical aspect, you have to follow these rules. You don't have to put it that way. But instead, you can, whenever the context demands, you can give some grammatical input. That would go a long way for the learners. Well, we are to teach what it means to say independent class and what it means to say dependent class, but not in plain terms. But there are many activities, there are many ways in which you can introduce these terms, these classes to them. We'll see how they can be introduced. Well, as I have already said, I'll confine this talk to compound sentence, complex sentence, and then compound complex sentence. The very well-established acronym that we have for dealing with coordinating conjunctions is FANBOYS, which stand for and, nor, but, or, yet, so. If this is the way it is given to the students, then they are likely to remember these conjunctions, coordinating conjunctions, for the reason that there is an acronym there which is very easy to remember. So this is how you can deliver information about these, and this is how you can teach them the conjunctions over there. Have the student sentences using the conjunctions appropriate. This will of course provide them a good practice. Now I'll take you to some possible activities that you can make use of in order to teach these compound sentences to the students. These will be relevant to both the secondary school students and also to the students of +2 level. The first activity I have kept over here is have students identify sentence parts in pairs for cooperative learning. See, let's say you've given a worksheet to them on which there are some compound sentences. You ask them, you instruct them to identify the compound sentences. This is with a view to them know what are independent classes and what are dependent classes, and how an independent class can function in a sentence. Can this stand on its own or not? Can other classes stand on their own or not? Or do they require any other word unit for them to stand firm and semantically rich and so on, structurally stand or so on. This helps them visually recognize each sentence part. So let them chance to see how various parts are conjoining, how various parts are constituting something called a sentence. This is one activity that you can think of. And then write different parts of sentences on colored paper to create a jumble. So it's also kind of game. Well, I haven't found a picture that has 3 colored stripes. I have found only this thing, but if they are colored, because we're going to keep 2 independent classes and 1 conjunction as such, so let there be 1 color for the independent classes and 1 color for the conjunction, so that they will know whether a particular stripe is a conjunction stripe or an independent class, a class stripe. So this is how you can keep and give them to the students. You can write independent classes on 2 colors of paper. We can cut each example into strips. And of course, on the last color of paper, we can write down conjunctions. And then we can scatter different colors of paper onto desks and have students create compound sentences. They will join the sentences by picking up the right or the appropriate conjunction. And finally, the students have to pick classes that go well together, that can constitute a sentence with a conjunction. They also have to pick a conjunction strip in order for them to constitute the sentence. Yet another activity that you can think of is to ask students to search through their books for compound sentences. They are, of course, they have the prescribed textbooks. So we can instruct them to open their textbooks, and if there is any written discourse over there, instruct them to identify the compound sentences over there. This will be a very good practice because this is their own prescribed book, and they will at the same time read, and they will also try to pay attention to the structure there. They will be looking at the structure, and they will also be looking at trying to understand the sentence. So in both ways, it will be beneficial. And it doesn't have to be the book alone. Some book that they have been reading, a novel or some other book that they have been reading, we can ask them to open that book and identify the compound sentences over there. They can even underline those independent clauses and also underline the conjunctions which are crucial for sentences to combine. And now in order to create more to them and create more and more interest in them, we can also challenge them to a race to create compound sentences. So we can set a timer for 3 minutes or 5 minutes, depending on the time that you have, and have the students write as many compound sentences as they can. When time elapses, you can, each student passes his or her paper to a partner to check that each sentence is compound. So this kind of practice will go, and especially in the case of having many students in classroom, where we cannot expect any kinesthetic activity to be given to them, we can instruct them to produce sentences sitting wherever they are, wherever they're seated. They can do this quite well, and it also worked in my classroom as well. And then place students in pairs and have them create sentences to show. We can instruct students to take note cards. Students in pair can take a note card. On each note card, have the students write 2 compound sentences, 1 simple sentence. Have them exchange cards and see if they can correctly identify the structure of each sentence. So they are to cross-check whether the sentences are in conformity with the grammatical patterns. And also you can encourage to have goofy sentences so that there'll be laughter and there'll be excitement to do more and to work more on those sentences. And students always take interest in doing something that interests them, that enthuses them, that gives them some kind of entertainment in any form. Now, moving on to teaching complex sentence. Well, one thing that I'd like to make a special mention over here is that try to tell you some possible activities that you can think of for teaching compound. It doesn't mean that they are only to be used for teaching compound sentences as such. They can, of course, be used for complex sentences as well. But you just have to customize it. Teachers can teach students about subordinating conjunctions. Well, subordinating or this term is not doesn't sound to be so grammatical term, so it is more of a general term. So you don't have to worry about how the students respond to this word. I'm telling you all this because if I use the terms like conjunction, the inflection, derivation, the agreement with the subject and all, my own students lose interest on listening, on hearing these terms my students lose interest in listening to me. So I'm very particular about not using grammatical terms, technical terms in my language classroom. So, but instead we can use very general terms which are explanative about how something works and how something is treated in the structure. So teachers can teach students about subordinating conjunctions, and not kind of list given to them and asking them look at all the conjunctions one by one. Instead, you can categorize all these conjunctions into various parts like this. We have a few which mark comparison. We have a few which mark time, and some mark concession, some mark relative pronouns, some mark reason, some mark condition. And you can make use of this pic over here. I found it online, very interesting. There are other categorizations as well, but more or less it would be the same. So we can use such categorized forms as such. Well, coming to how to teach these complex sentences. A very useful way to deal with complex sentences is to provide students with a subordinating conjunction and a dependent class, and instruct to provide a suitable independent class. We are giving them a dependent class and conjunction, and instructing them to compose or constitute an independent class. For example, I've given one over here. After returning home from work, I gave a dependent class over here. So they have to complete it. Or although it was late. We miss, in a sense, we can give them an independent class. And ask them to make a dependent class using appropriate conjunction. That is also fine. So we can make it either way. Well, another interesting thing is we can, of course, pass an index card, just one index card to each student, where there will be either dependent or independent class. And each student will leave the card on his desk and walk around to find his partner. Let's say some student has got an dependent class, then he has to go for, if a student has got independent class, he has to go for dependent class and vice versa. So this is how we can make them work on this. And the student has to keep moving until he gets his partner, until he's the required class. And the teacher would inform the learners that their card has just a single card correct match. We need to ensure that there is only one match, one correct match. There can be 2-3 matches. There is only one match. Then there will be scope for them to find out the exact sentence that can go with it, go with what he has got. So after finding a match for each card, each pair of students would stand and read aloud this sentence. So one with independent class and one with dependent class, they together try to conjoin the sentence, and they together read it out to the rest of the students. And this is how it continues in the whole class. And another possibility that you can think of is to ask students to sit into groups and complete the following sentences with subordinating conjunctions. You will give almost the sentence there. They just have to fill in the blank with the subordinating conjunction. What lies what lies with them is their ability to choose the appropriate conjunction that can fit in the blank over there and run the sentence meaningful, make the sentence semantically rich. So this is I've been doing quite for some time, and this is still the one of the possible activities that we can think about. And the teacher must give some time to find a suitable subordinating conjunction for each sentence. So many teachers, for the time constraint, do not give the students enough time for them to come up with the appropriate conjunction. But if we can make sure that they are given the enough time, they will know how the structure gets formed with the help of a conjunction. And another thing which really works for all students at all ages is playing games. It's in fact fun games which provide great help in students' life about any structure. It doesn't have to be structure alone, but anything, even with vocabulary, even with pronunciation, you can experiment with all manifestations of language by giving the students kind of games and some activities that include fun and that include some kinesthetic activity. The teacher can teach complex sentences using a 3. It doesn't have to be a 3-minute race. You can make it to the 5-minute race, a 6-minute race. After setting a time of 3 minutes, students will write as many complex sentences as possible. We had this, I discussed this for compound sentences as well. So we set a timer, we give them a certain amount of time, maybe 3 minutes or 5 minutes, and instruct them to produce as many sentences as possible on their own. And the students will start, of course. Once the time is over, the students will share what they wrote with their partner and discuss them. See, they are not just done with the task with just producing the sentences, but if they can discuss those sentences and read them out to the students, the rest of the class will also get to listen to these classes. So that is how all students on the whole will get to listen to so many sentences as such. Students asking about the favorite things. We can give them a task like their favorite food or something they fancy, something they like so much, something that enthuses them so much. And for instance, I have given one over here. I like winter because I like to play in the snow. So this sentence would be cut into 2 parts or 3 parts. Let's say I said why box, where box, what box, and why box. So you will have to pick up one for what, and you will have to pick up one for why, which means you will have 2 boxes, what box and why box. You need to pick the 2, one from each, and then combine the sentence. And this would be an interesting thing to do for students. Teaching compound complex. See, one thing that we need to make sure that we need to know is that the students are expected to know the difference that exists among compound sentence, complex sentence, compound complex sentence. For compound sentence, we will have 2 independent clauses joined by a conjunction, which is a coordinating conjunction. And for complex sentence, we are to have at least 1 independent class and 1 dependent class. At least 1 independent class and 1 dependent class. And these complex sentences will take a conjunction which is subordinating. And coming to compound complex sentences, we are to have at least 2 independent classes and 1 dependent class. Because in compound complex sentences, you have compound sentence within, and you also have complex sentence within. So by complex sentence, we said 1 independent class and 1 dependent class. So that way, compound complex sentence has 2 independent classes and 1 dependent class. Let this be clear to all the students. Let this be clear to all the students. And we haven't used any grammatical to let the students understand this. We haven't used, compound, complex. They are, of course, general terms. So let them know. Make sure that they understand what it means to say complex compound and compound. And you could begin, and we're talking about now what we can do for these complex compound sentences. You can give them a sentence in the very beginning. There's nothing wrong. You can sentence like, when he woke up, he was late for work, and his boss was very upset. When he woke up, he was late for work, and his boss was very upset. You can give them the sentence. You can keep it on the board, and you can split this sentence, saying when he woke up. It can be independent class. He was late for work, which is a dependent one, which can stand to be a sentence by itself. And his boss was very upset. And his boss were very upset. His boss were very upset. It can also stand by itself. And is something which is joining these two sentences together. So this is how, let them understand. Why do we have to see that they understand what it means to say compound, complex, and compound? Well, unless they know what else is forming a sentence, they will not be able to produce sentences on their own. Let them have the idea. Let them have an idea of how these clauses are going together in order to constitute a sentence. Most of them can understand what the whole expression means. Of course, yes. But let them also understand how the patterns, how the structural patterns are behaving or functioning, so that it gives them an insight into the structural patterns. And one day they will also try to add some more clauses to this and make it a multi-clausal structure. So the basic sentence is always the same. We try to add one within another, which is called embedding. So a structure within the structure, that getting into another structure, this thing will happen over a period of time. But in order for them to have insights into this behavior of structural patterns, they are to have some idea as to how these clauses are going together and constituting a sentence as such. Yes, you could begin reinforcing student understanding of compound complex sentences by providing a handout featuring a number of examples of this type of sentence. This is what I have discussed. Working in pairs or small groups. Have the students identify and mark the independent clauses in each sentence. When students can do this confidently, they can then begin to attempt to compose their own sentences. This is also part of what I have just said. So once they know how a class behaves and how a class is covered, they can on their own produce sentences, produce clauses. Another good activity that works well as a summary to this sentence structure is providing the students with a collection of jumbled sentences of each of the three types. So you can give them jumbled sentences, a list of jumbled sentences to them, and ask to make sentences out of those jumbled parts. So this is something which we have discussed earlier as well. And challenge the students to sort the sentences into each of the three types. You ask them whether is it a compound sentence, a complex sentence, or compound complex sentence. You can ask them and they'll be able to tell you. In a plain, we compare the findings of each group and examine together those sentences where the groups is their categorization. Tips. Well, I discussed some of these possibilities, but it doesn't mean that they make an exhaustive list. They are not. By all means, they are not exhaustive list. We can explore all possible ways, all possibilities, and it is you who know your students much better than much better, and you know what works with your students and what doesn't, what to what extent, and so on. So you can also talk to other teachers from other schools and colleges just to find out what activities are going on there for teaching these aspects. And you can also try with your students, and if a certain thing is not working for your students, you can then resort to something else. So as teacher, we always have this liberty to explore all possible methods, all possible ways that can come to the aid of teaching and learning process of this. Don't be afraid to try different activities as you go along. That's what I've been saying. What works for one group of kids won't necessarily work for another class. That's okay. See, in our English language education study, we categorize even the teaching strategies, the teaching materials as well, in tune with the level, in tune with the understanding levels of the students, in tune with the background of the students as well. So this kind of work should always be there. The teacher should feel responsible to see what can go well with his students and what not. So we comment all the possibilities. But one thing is, in India, we have classrooms which are full of students, and in many colleges and many schools, it's very difficult for teachers to go for kinesthetic activities in classroom. So for such teachers, you can think about some possibilities that you can put into practice. You can always try to explore, and you can always try to speak to other teachers as to how they are dealing with certain grammatical components and all. And be patient with yourself. If it's your first time teaching this content, many a time we may not be patient enough to give them enough time to come up with good sentences. So the teacher has to be very patient, and it's something which every teacher is expected to. So let's be patient, and if possible, we can also, these days, the teachers are creating for the students, and you can keep interacting with the students on WhatsApp. You can keep sending the material. You can keep asking the students to post their own sentences on the WhatsApp group. So it all requires some, you need to make up your mind to spend your time with students even after college hours. Well, if the time permits you. So if you do it, it's appreciable. So these are the useful resources on sentence structure. Owl Purdue's writing lab has a plethora of work, plethora of the material on teaching writing, and also the various writing activities. And I find that to be very resourceful. And then you have his writing skill site. And coming to books, you can think about Grammar for English Language Teachers by Martin Parrott. He deals with how to deal with a certain structure for students. So I found a very good analysis of a structure which can be used for teaching, which can be used for your own teaching while dealing with these components of grammar. And the Teacher's Grammar of English is also equally informative one for teachers. And then Oxford Learners Grammar Finder by John Eastwood. I recommend this book to most of my students. It doesn't use grammatical terms, but rather tries on simple explanation. It tries to give more examples, and it also the great thing that we are to talk about this book is it starts with a simple structure. It starts with simple sentence, and then tries to take the reader to more structures. So from the simple sentence structure, from the simple structure, the most complex structure, it has arranged in such a way that offers a very good study for every reader. So I strongly recommend all teachers to recommend this book to the students. And there are also students who came up saying it has been so beneficial for their learning. And coupled English grammar as well, because there is an analysis of the structure over there, which the teachers can use for teach the students. So this is all the presentation. Thank you so much. If there are any questions, you can leave them on the chat box. I just discussed some of the possibilities that flashed my mind, and it is by no means exhaustive. You can keep exploring in your teaching. You can keep exploring in your search for better strategies, better techniques, better approaches in order to have your students speak in English. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your presentation. Teaching advanced English sentence structure. One of the useful topics to be very good at English language, but very rarely it is taken by the speakers for presentation. You have made it very interesting by suggesting simple and practical ideas and innovative activities. Thank you very much, sir. We are receiving very good response in the form of questions. So there are some questions. A basic question asked by Mrs. Neila Kannam. What is the difference between a clause and a phrase?
Well, a clause is defined to have a verb in it, element, which is an action word. Phrase in syntactic theories, a phrase is a verbal phrase, a nominal phrase, an adjectival phrase, adverbial phrase. They by default all grammatical categories are phrases by default. The reason for such an analysis is there are also other elements that also go with a particular grammatical category. So in order to accommodate, in order to say that this is one chunk where you can have the optional elements with the obligatory element. So this is a phrase. So if I just say go, that itself is a verbal phrase in syntactic theory. But in general grammar, prescriptive or descriptive grammar, it is just a verb, and it can also be treated to be a clause, because underlyingly it is you go. It's not just go alone. So there is you, which is implied. So it can be a clause. So what we can now say is a clause is expected to have an action word. That can be a clause. We have a noun clause as well. So you might be wondering, how can a noun transform into a clause? Because noun is something which is just a name, but a verb is something which talks about action. So when there is action, we call it a verb. But we also have nominal clause. So clause is in fact a functional word. A functional word. Let's say going there is not recommendable. Going there is not recommendable. It is not recommendable. Going there is not recommendable. So going there, it becomes a clause there. Okay, I hope I answered the question.
Right, sir. Mrs. Parvati's question is, teaching compound and complex sentences is a challenging task as far as heterogeneous students are concerned. Could you suggest any techniques?
Well, when you have students who make a heterogeneous group, you can think about giving them some sentences in their own languages, if at all you can, or you can keep the English sentence itself on the board and you can explain it in very simple terms. They may share different languages, but still they have some knowledge about English, because we expect the students to be from secondary schools and +2 level. So we can expect some knowledge about English. So it works well, even whatever I have discussed so far, the possible activities, they will go well even with the heterogeneous group as well.
Right, sir. T.H. Lawrence has asked 3 questions. The first one, what about the simple sentence that would itself stand out as an independent clause as well? That's the first question. The second one, what according to you is the easiest way to identify a clause? And the third one, doesn't the student need to identify the essential elements of a class?
What's the last one, sir?
Doesn't the student need to identify the essential elements of a class?
Of course, yes. Of course, yes. Well, of course, yes, in the sense, when the student wants to analyze, have knowledge about how chunks are going together in order to frame a sentence, of course, in those terms, he is expected to know about it. Well, the reason for me not to have shed some light is that on simple sentence is that simple sentence is in a way the basic sentence structure. Simple sentence is in a way an independent class. The canonical word order, which is SVO or SV or whatever. So it is in a way an independent class. A sentence itself is an independent class. A simple sentence is an independent class all by itself.
Probably the last question.
Raghavendra sir, just a minute.
Yes.
Satish, you have the questions posted on the WhatsApp group. If you want, you can refer to the questions. There are many questions, but Lawrence has asked many questions. So maybe if you want, you can refer to that before answering. Thank you, Satish.
Dr. Jyotsna Sinha is asking, to what class of students can we administer the activities discussed?
I have made it very clear in the very beginning of the session. You can make use of these activities for both secondary school students and also for the students of +2 or intermediate. And you can also deal with these. You can also, and even let's say the undergraduate students as well, in order to give them more insights into the combinatorial possibilities of the classes. So it is all, it is up to you as to what you can use and what you can't use. Yes, a little while ago, you asked me 3 questions, out of which the second one was not answered, I believe. What, according to you, is the easiest way to identify a class? See, a class invariably has a verb in it. It talks about some action. It indicates some action. At the temple, there is no action in it. Going to the temple, there is an action in it. But going to the temple can function as a noun class. Going to the temple is appreciable, let's say. Going to the temple is appreciable. The function is noun class because the position is nominal position there. But there is an action in it. So it is a noun class. So in order for any chunk to be called a class, it is invariably expected to have verb, an action word in it. There is a question over here. Can a noun, pronoun like Ram or you, in response to the question, who did this, be called a sentence? Of course, it can be called a sentence because you are using this noun or pronoun in response to a sentence already. So in a way, you can say, did Ram come? Did Ram come? Yes, I say. Yes, which means Ram has, yes, Ram has come. Let's say it's part of the sentence. Yes, Ram has come. So there is a sentence implied. There is a sentence implied there. Can it be called a sentence? Of course, if you feel that there is the whole expression implied and you're just explicitly pronouncing one word or 2 words, then you can take it to mean that you're using a sentence. Any more questions?
No more questions, sir. Thank you very much for answering all the questions. Now it's time for vote of thanks. I feel it's an honor to me to propose vote of thanks. Firstly, I'd like to thank the speaker, Dr. Satish Kumar Nadimpalli, for his profound and insightful presentation. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I thank the technical team, Dr. Praveen, Joseph Vinod, for their support. I extend my deepest thanks to the ELTAI Webinar Organizing Committee. I also express my sincere thanks to all the participants. Thank you, one and all. Over to you, Dr. Praveen.
Thank you, Dr. Raghavendra.
Thank you.
Dear participants, so thank you for attending the session. We know the times are hard out. In spite of all those difficulties, you all made it a point to attend the session. Thank you. So here, what you see on the screen is the poster of the next webinar, that is forthcoming webinar, titled The Art and Science of Storytelling. The resource person of this session will be Dr. G. Harita. She's a course writer from BAOU Ahmedabad. The session is moderated by Dr. Maitri Shinde. She is the head of the department, St. Mary's College, Hyderabad. So in this session, we have 2 student discussants. One, Ms. Shima Mustafa and Ms. Surya Meghna from St. Francis College for Women, Hyderabad. So I request the participants to participate to this, to this webinar as well and get enlightened. Thank you very much.